G'day, welcome to Pay It Forward. Now today, you know I love designing these little needle book covers. So today I've got a beautiful little dog kennel style, and I have actually, the little dog there is styled after a West Highland White Terrier, one of my absolute favourite breeds. And but you can certainly change up the colours and change that the look of that little dog if you like. Let me give you a little peek inside. Lots of goodies inside. We've got all sorts of things to make up there. Great pattern for giving it as a gift for a dog lover and a sewist. So I've got the free pattern all ready for you all. All you need to do is click on the link in the description box below. I'll also put it number 1 in the comments for you, and you'll find your free pattern templates. Now when you go to print them out, make sure that you check that your printer is printing at actual size. That way all your little pattern pieces are going to be absolutely spot on. So let's get busy making our new needle book cover. So let's get started and see what we need to make up our needle book. So our front section, which is actually our front cover of our needle book, I've cut that one from felt with my fusible woven medium interfacing applied to the back. We need this to be quite stable. I've gone for felt because I need the center of the little opening, little doorway, to be that nice dark color. It doesn't have to be black, and this will all change depending on the colors that you're using for your project. So that's why I go for that dark color. And the interior is cut the same. It's the same pattern piece, except that I've made this one from felt fabric, which is simply felt, a piece of felt and fabric fused together using fusible webbing. I have a video that talks about preparing fabric in this way. I'll just pop that link up the top there for you if you want to have a look at that. So the interior piece, I want it to be nice and pretty and to stand out with all of my little features inside. Now we won't be turning this one through, so they will be sewn together like this. So this will be our needle book. So we've got our interior piece and our front piece. Now you can make that front piece the same way as you have the interior piece as felt fabric. It just depends on what you're going to use, but I'm happy with the black felt, and there's also less fraying that way. So once you've got those two pieces, we need to see what we're going to be adding to those. So we're going to be adding our front section, which frames up our little dog kennel doorway there, and I've just got a little brick print, but it can be anything at all. Now I do like to use fabric for these pieces because it keeps everything nice and flat. Then we're going to need our base piece. Now these pieces I've made in felt. We've got our side pieces, each side, whatever suits your colors, and those are felt also. Now all of these pieces have fusible webbing applied so that they can be ironed straight on. Then we've got our roof section, which I'm going to do in the nice red. I've got a little sign there, and you can add a little word, a little name, anything you like there. And then of course we have our dog. So we start with our body piece, which is actually tucked under that base. There. And you'll notice that I've made it to look like a Westie because I adore them, and because it's a little white dog and it actually shows up very well on the project. So that's my little body section, and then we have, and these still just have fusible webbing applied. Now the face is a little different because we're going to apply that one a little differently. So the face section is made from double felt, which, like the felt fabric, is just two pieces of felt joined together with fusible webbing. So we're going to be adding that one separately, so it's actually not going to be sewn directly on all the way around, it's just going to be anchored by the eyes, so we get a nice little 3D look at the front there. The muzzle section also has fusible webbing applied because that one will be ironed on, And you'll notice there that even though I'm making a white dog, I've got quite a deep cream for the back of the head, and then I've got a real clear white for that front muzzle so that it shows up. We have just a little scrap of black for the nose, a couple of little inside ear sections there. We do have, I've organised a little collar that will sit here. You can embellish this one any way you like. I've got tiny doll buttons for the eyes. You could use beads. And then we have, cut from double felt again, the same as the headpiece. We've got 2 of the front feet. And they're just going to be popped on there. Again, a bit of a 3D look so that it's really sitting over that edge there. I'm going to be adding just a little bone charm there. You can add anything you like there. And we will also need a button for doing up our little needlebook. So there you go. You can see how much you can embellish those. And then for our interior, we are going to use, we're going to start with the opposite side. You have all your pattern pieces in your templates, tell you exactly what to cut and the applications you need for the back. Basically, this is our little needle bank. These 2 pieces of felt have nothing applied to them. They're nice and soft, ready for your needles and pins. This base piece here, it does have fusible webbing applied, so we can iron that one on before we stitch it. And you can see that I've pinking sheared just the lower edges of each of those. It's just a pretty classic finish. Then we've got a little pocket we're going to put on here, and this one is just felt fabric again. That one is just going to sit there. And I have made up a little paw pad, and I'm just using buttons for those little toes. That one will be popped on there. And that one has fusible webbing applied also. Then we're going to be adding, this side is our little dog bed, which serves also as a little pin bank there. So a base piece, make sure your base first piece is darker, and then your front basket section is lighter, just for perspective so that it really shows up well. And then we've got double felt again, is cut. And that is our little cushion that's going to be tucked in there, and that is where our pins will go. Also cut in double felt, we have our top bar, which is our bone, and we're going to be securing that with a couple of extra buttons, and we can halve that there. We can create little pockets there. I'm also going to add a little hanging tag just for fun, because why wouldn't we? And that one's just cut from double felt. You can add anything you like there too. I'm going to repeat that little bone, and I will be adding a few coordinating beads there. We're going to hang that from one of those buttons there. And we also need a button for the back, for doing up the back of this one. So you can see how that all comes together. And of course, you can make as many changes as you like to this. You can add so many different things. We're also going to need for the inside 2 pieces of mat board cut ready, and they are going to give us a nice stable finish so that our little needle book will always look fresh and crisp. You're also going to need your extra strong threads or embroidery threads and pearl thread, preferably an 8-ply. I find easier to work with. We're going to be sewing around the entire outside of this needle book when we're done. And I will be using a variety of colours to do that. I'm going to do most of the work as much as I can on the machine. I like these needle books to be nice and flat and clean looking, so I'll do as much as I can for you that way. So we've got our inside pieces, we're all ready with that, and you're also going to need your clear craft glue, which is how we're going to glue those little mat boards in. So our first step is on our front cover. So you have to remember that you're starting on the right hand side, because this is your needle book folded over. So let's remove everything except for these first two pieces. The first two pieces to press on, you want to line up that little door section. You're going to have space on this side. We need that there because that's where our needle book is going to fold. So you want to line it all up perfectly with this edge. Press that one into place with a hot iron and a protective cloth, and also line up the body of your dog with the base there, and also press that one into place. I'm then going to go to my machine and I'm going to use a close zigzag stitch. Let me see if I can find my caravan here to show you. A nice close zigzag, because it keeps everything nice and flat. It's really a good looking finish, and sometimes even tidier than a hand sewn applique. I can't believe I'm saying that to you people, but it's true. Sometimes the machine works better. So we're going to stitch just around this opening here, and I'm going to coordinate my thread as best I can because I don't want to break up that really nice dark line. Remember, whatever colour your dog is, you must make sure that it's nice and contrasting to your back, what's in this doorway. And remember that when you look into a closed sort of area, it's quite dark. So also wanted to mention too that with this little pattern you can change up the look just by tipping those ears over if you like. So you can change up that little breed in those tiny ways. So I will be sewing around this one with the same stitch, that close little zigzag, and I'll be using a coordinating thread with that one as well. We're going to leave these two edges for now because we're going to be adding pieces there. So let's get those first couple of pieces on and stitched. Once you have those first pieces stitched into place, you can see how nice and tidy that little zigzag stitch is. Now we're going to add our next pieces, which are our base section goes on first. You can press that one on first. Then our side pieces, they get pressed on in place. And then our roof section gets pressed on over the top of those side pieces, so you can do them one at a time. And then you can go ahead and stitch in the same way. I'm going to use that same stitch on the interior of each of those pieces. We don't need to do the outside because we're going to be sewing that with a blanket stitch at the end. However, on this piece, which is along your spine there, we do need to sew that side also, so that's all nice and neat and tidy. So get those pieces pressed on and stitched into place. So there you can see I've got my sides on, base, and that top section there, all stitched with that same zigzag stitch. I've then gone ahead and just added my little sign at the top there, and you can add whatever you like to that. And then I've pressed my little collar in place. You'll see, just slide it down until it fits perfectly across the neck there, and it's perfectly cut to suit that one. And I have gone ahead and just sewn that same zigzag stitch in a matching colour this time. But of course you can contrast it all up, do whatever you like. You could do a single row of stitching if you want to give that real look of a collar there. So that's our front section. That part of it is complete. So now we're going to make our little face, which is added separately. So we've got our base double felt here, and then we're going to add our muzzle section, and that will be pressed on. So just as we have been, I'm going to line that one up. We're going to press that one on with a hot iron and a protective cloth. And you can also add those little ear sections, inner ear sections, unless you're folding those ears over, and press those into place. Now once I've done that, I'm actually going to just go to the machine. I'm going to machine stitch around those using a straight stitch, just a very small straight stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead and just stitch this top outside area of the muzzle section. I'm not going to sew this lower edge. I'd rather that just was a nice clean finish there, and we will be sewing a little lip line in there anyway, so it will all be held in place, and we are going to sew a blanket stitch around the entire outside edge of that head. So for now, we just get those little ears in place and stitch around the top part of this template. So just to bring that up a bit closer for you to see, there is my stitching line just from the top of that muzzle around that edge there to there, and I've left that one plain, and I have stitched around those two ear pieces. Next step is to add the nose. Now that's just that small piece of felt with the fusible webbing applied to the back, and I'm going to press that one into place. Alternatively, if you are worried about stitching on such a tiny nose, there's a couple of ways to do it. If you do have a little oval shaped button, that could work just as well. A round button just doesn't look right, but an oval shaped button, if you're lucky enough to find one, can work. I will be pressing that one on, and then I'm just going to sew that one on with a little blanket applique stitch. Alternatively, you could stitch over that template with some straight stitches, so it's entirely up to you. So I'm going to get that one pressed into place, and you can see exactly where it sits. Make sure that little point at the bottom is lined up with the middle part of the mouth there. So I've got that nose pressed on, and given that it is that small, it might be easier for me to show you. I've got a doubled strand of extra strong thread on my needle here, and I'm actually just going to do a couple of stitches over the top of that template, just because that's probably easier than sewing around that shape. So I've come in at the very base there, right on that point, and I've brought my two stitches up. Make sure they're not crossed over, and just going in at the top of that template, right in the center there, pulling that one through. And it's really just a matter of going from side to side with those stitches and just covering that template. And you don't have to have it all meeting up because we're working with black, so just a few stitches will hold that template into place. Okay, so there you can see that nose has been stitched over, and it does give it a nice little rounded effect. It's probably the easiest way to deal with a tiny nose like that. You can see then I've just taken that one to the machine and just stitched in that little lip line. Just done it on the machine so that it's nice and straight, and I've gone over that a couple of times. So we've got our nice little face done. So now we're going to sew around the entire outside edge of this face with a blanket stitch, and I will start at the back. I'm doing it with my extra strong thread. You can use a pearl thread if you like, or perhaps stranded cotton. If you're using stranded cotton, probably just 2 strands. And I have got a knot in the end. I've just come in from behind, come out between those 2 layers. So if you haven't sewn a blanket stitch before, I'll put the link up the top there to my video that shows you how. But I'm going to keep my stitches really, really tiny. Blanket stitch is just going through all of your layers and coming out through the loop and pulling that one in nice and tight. Keep your stitches nice and even. So through all the layers, bring your needle out through that loop and pulling that one in. That's going to give us a nice, really nice finished edge. Just make sure that as you go that you rotate your work so that all your stitches are going out nice and evenly. So once I've finished that outer edge, I'm going to do exactly the same and blanket stitch the 2 feet, those 2 front feet. So once we have that stitching done around that little face shape and around those little paws, we can go ahead and attach those. Now if you like, you can use a little bit of clear craft glue like I have, just to position those paws in place. You can see they sit just over that edge there, and I've made 3 little marks there because I'm just going to stitch 1, 2 and 3 little claws into place. before I've done that, I've come in from behind and just taken one stitch using the same thread to anchor that top section there. So I've got my doubled strand of extra strong thread, and I'm just going to come in from behind just exactly through that little mark that I've made. Pull that one through. I've got a knot in the end, and I'm just going to take that stitch down, and we'll just tuck that little paw in nicely. It's going to knot up on me. Of course it is. There we go. Pull that one in. Make sure you pull on both those threads there. Position that stitch where you want it, and then again come in from behind at that central point there, right on that mark. To place our second stitch. Pull that one in tight, make sure this one is pulled in tight, and the same with the third one there, and then just repeat with the other side. So that has our little claws in place, and now we're just going to add the head. So I've made little marks right there where I want the eyes to sit, and you can see that they do sit nice and tight in close to that muzzle template there. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to just stitch those eyes on, and I'm going to stitch them on through all the layers. So that way that little head is in place, and we have that nice little 3D effect of that head there. So I like to give the head a bit of a head tilt there, and you can do that either way, and you can see that's just a lot more pleasing than straight up. So just tilt it to the side a little. Add those buttons and stitch them on all the way through those layers. So there you can see that completed front with that little head in place there. If you find it easier, you can add a little bit of clear craft glue to the back of that head to position it while you sew those buttons in place. You can see then that I've added my little neck trinket there, and I have sewn on my buttons. I've just made sure that they match up either side, so when we do that fastening they will be in the right place. So that's it for the front cover of our needle book. So now we can move on to the inside, and the first thing we're going to do with the inside is we're going to start with our dog basket, and we're going to sew that same blanket stitch. You see I've done that there on the top edge of the front of that basket. It just gives it a nice finish, and it also makes it look like that nice rolled edge of a basket. We also need to do that to our piece, which is double felt, which is our cushion, just for a lovely finish there. You see that one will slip in there. So our next step after we've got those done is to press on that first piece of our basket, and it sits just over 1 centimetre from the base. Remember, we're stitching around that base, we don't want to interfere with that, and just about 1.5 centimetres from the edge here, remembering we've got this fold here. So now I'm going to sew a blanket applique stitch just across this top edge, and I'm doing that because it will match up with my edge of the basket here so that it all looks the same, that nice rolled edge. Of course you could do it on the machine if you want to. I just like that effect. So I'm just coming in from behind. I'm going to be using the same thread, which is my extra strong thread, and I'm sewing a blanket applique. So I'm going to put the link up the top there for my blanket applique stitch video in case you haven't sewn one before. But it's very similar to the blanket stitch, except that we go through the layers and we come out right on the edge of our little shape. bring our needle through and bring our needle through that loop. So the concept is exactly the same. Take my next stitch, go through all of my layers, but come out right on the edge, making sure I'm taking up some of that underside fabric. And that's going to create a binding stitch in the same way that the blanket stitch does. And I'm going to continue with that one right round just to the top of that curve. And once you have that top line stitched into place, now I'm just going to take this one back to the machine. I'm going to line up that front, and I'm going to sew from this top edge right the way around to this top edge corner using that same tight zigzag stitch that I've been using on the front. There we go. So that has our dog basket already, and all we need to do is just slip that cushion in there nice and snug, and that's the perfect place for all of our pins to sit. Next we're going to add our bone, which creates another little opportunity for making little pockets. Where you put those little dividers in is entirely up to you. I'm going to be sewing mine on with 4 buttons either side. You may wish to make 3 little stitching lines, so you've got 3 little compartments just for tucking little things in. You might want to just go straight down the center, or maybe just off center a little to have a larger one and a more narrow one. I won't be separating these sections here because I find that the buttons will hold that down perfectly well. So just a matter of lining up. Remember that we've got our fold here. Remember that we're going to be stitching around the entire outside, so you don't want to get too close, and you don't want to be too close to the bottom here either. So it's basically just lined up just a little above the actual apex there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm probably just going to stitch down the center there, back and forth on the machine, and then I will sew my little buttons in place, and that gives me that little pocket bar. If you have a look here, you can see that I have stitched my little divider in there, and as I've gone to stitch the buttons onto security the side, if you want that pocket there to be able to hold something a little bit thicker, just give it a little scrunch up. Keep the bottom layer flat and give it a little scrunch up, and then sew your buttons on. You can see I've got a little bit more room there for something more substantial, perhaps a little wrapped tape measure or a spool, something like that can tuck in there, while this side is nice and flat and will take suitable things in that side. It's just a little tip there if you want a little bit more room. So that is our right side complete, and now we go ahead and we're going to add our left hand side pieces. So what I've done is I've got those into position. I've pressed on my first fabric piece, and I'm keeping everything lined up at the bottom, so everything is nicely even, and I've laid that out first so that I know exactly where that pocket's going to go, remembering here's your center and you don't want this pocket too close. So once that one is pressed on, I've gone ahead and I've zigzagged the top edge of that little pocket, and it just means that as we're taking things in and out, it's not going to fray. So now I'm just going to stitch with a straight stitch right the way around that edge, and I'm going to do my same zigzag stitch that I've been using just to set that little pocket in place. So I now have those into place. See, I've got my little pocket there now, and I've just popped my 2 little needle keeps, my little sheets of felt there, line those up, and now I'm simply going to stitch with a wide zigzag across just to hold that one in place, and then I'm just going to add my 2 little buttons, really just for decoration, and hold those into place. Okay, so just about our last step for the inside, aside from our little charm tag that we're going to put together, is to add our paw print. You can see I've pressed that one on right in the center there, lined it up with the top point there, and just a little way from the top. I want to keep everything nice and clear here, and also we need to be adding our buttons, so it's a good idea to line up your buttons first just to make sure that you're getting your positioning right. Pop those on there, gives you a good idea of where that's all going to sit. Once you're happy with where that is, press that one on. And then we're going to sew, well, I'm going to sew a blanket applique stitch around the edge, which is the same as this one here that we've done on that top edge, and that's going to tie that side in with that side. Alternatively, you can go ahead and use that same little tight zigzag stitch to stitch around there, and then go ahead and sew your buttons on in place. And so there we go, we've got our interior all completely done there. I've gone ahead too and just sewn a blanket stitch around that little heart tag there, and I've added my little word love and my little trinket there, that little bone again, and added a couple of beads, and this is just some 5-ply pearl thread that I've added that one too. I've tied a knot in the end, and that one can just sit over that top button. And that's really just a little decorative notion, and why not? Because it just makes the interior, these just make the best gifts, and they're such a little treat to open up. So that's just a lovely little addition. You can add a couple of safety pins on the base of that one, but you can see it really brightens it up there. So basically, that's it, we're all done for the inside. Just pop that one aside. So you can see what I've gone ahead now and done. I have drawn a light line down the very center of that interior piece there, because now we're going to be joining our inside to our outside cover, and what you want to do is line those up. And what we're going to be doing is stitching this center line here first before we add our inside supports. So I find that it's useful just to add some glue either side of that central line. I'm not going to add any glue right on that line, but just either side of it. It's just to hold that one in place exactly while we stitch it. It just really helps with the positioning, so I can really get that one lined up. So I'm going to get that one lined up and into place, make sure everything is where it should be. I'm going to let that dry for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to stitch down that center just 2 times, one on top of the other, so it's nice and strong. Now we're going to add our central supports. Now that we've got that center line stitched in, you can see I've already glued in one of them. So I've left myself room around the outside. You'll see that template will fit nicely. You just need enough room to sew a blanket stitch around. So I've got that one in place. And now I'm going to go ahead, and I've got the base, the back of that one all glued up with my clear craft glue. Open that one up, and it's just a matter of positioning that one in. Again, making sure you've got room all the way around for that stitch. And again, press that one into place. And then all we need to do is take our clear craft glue and glue up this whole section right around the edges there, and then we will press that one into place, and then we'll do the same with this side and press that one into place. And then we need that one to really dry completely before we start doing our blanket stitching to finish up. My needle book is now all nice and dry. That glue is nicely set. If you have any irregularities around the edges, you can go ahead with your scissors and just trim that up and make it all nicely squared off. So now I'm simply going to sew a blanket stitch around the entire outside edge of that cover. Now, a couple of things you need to remember when you're doing this is that blanket stitch should be the same on both sides of your work, but what you have to watch is that it's easy to take your stitch deeper on one side than the other. So you've got to remember that on this project we're going to be seeing the stitch on both sides, so you want to make sure that it's pretty on both sides. So that's just about being aware of taking your needle straight through, not in at an angle. So what I've done is I've got a knot in the end. I'm using 8-ply pearl thread here. I'm just going to do mine all in white. You can match up your colours if you like and change your colours as you go around. I'm just going to go with white all the way. And do remember, whatever colour you choose is also going to be seen on this side. So I have taken my needle in through the back here in this felt, and I've hidden my knot by just making that hole, entry hole, a little larger, and I've popped that knot in there so that can't be seen. So I'm just going to start with my blanket stitch, and when I say about going in straight, it's just a matter of making sure, because it's tempting to go in at an angle like this, but of course then your stitch will be shallow the other side. So you want to make sure you're going straight through, and I don't want my stitches to be too deep. It's just framing this one up and joining and binding those edges together. So taking my needle through the loop as we do with our blanket stitch, and keeping my stitches nice and even right the way around this little project. And it takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it, and it's good practice for your blanket stitch. So I will make my way right the way around. You can see there, like I've done on this one, that's your finishing edge there. And it really is a fabulous little finish. If you want to use a heavier weight pearl thread, that one is a 5-ply. So it just shows you, just frames it up differently. So I'm going to go ahead and get that whole outer edge stitched. Okay, so that has all of my stitching done. Now, there are a lot of layers to get through there. Layers, onions have layers. Not everybody likes onions. Not everybody likes sewing through lots of layers either. So you can tuck this one under the machine if you wish. Now, if you do, totally recommend using a jeans needle, and also set your stitch width to about a number 6, so you're really going to capture all of those edges. You could just do that same sort of zigzag as we've been doing throughout. Definitely that will save your hands, but if you like that little effect like I do, go ahead and sew that up. So let's have a look and see what this one looks like all fully kitted out with all of its gear. All done and all ready to have a look inside. Let's have a look at our goodies inside, and you can see they're all laid out, all sorts of bits and pieces in there, and I've actually added a little tiny little dog toy. So I've actually got a pattern and a tutorial, which is my bag charm that has that little bear on it, and it's the perfect size to fit in any of these little needlebook projects. I just thought it was very sweet to have a little dog toy in there for my little pup. So you can see so many different ways that you can change this one up. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do and all your colours and prints and all your little extras. So if you like making up the needle books, we've now got the little dog kennel, we have the cottage, and also the vintage camper, and they really do make the most amazing gifts. And if you're a beginner sewer, they're a great project to start on because everything is flat. They're very easy to work on, and they're a great project because you can make them as you go. You can come back to them, do a little bit more. They're a great little project to have as an ongoing project on your work desk. So I hope you've enjoyed making my dog kennel needlebook. Well, thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this one come together. I want to really encourage all of you new beginner sewers to come along and join our Facebook page. We have a great Facebook page. Big shout out to the lovely Alison who keeps that all going and works very hard behind the scenes. And it's where you can come and share your creations that you've made with my patterns, and you can get feedback and you can see what everybody else is doing, and it's a really, really good positive group. And if you're new, particularly 3D sewing, I want you to understand that the type of sewing that I do, it's a whole nother world. It's not dressmaking, it isn't quilting, it's something else, and has a specific set of, I guess you say, rules and techniques, and we can all help you out there. And I jump on that Facebook page whenever I can, because I love to see what you're all doing. So come along, I'm going to put the link in the description box below, and I hope to see you there. And looking forward to making some new designs for you all. I'm trying to keep it all very varied for you, so remember that. We do tend to drop back and forth, do some more 2D work, some 3D work. I do try and keep it all varied for you. I hope you understand that. I'm loving your comments, I'm loving hearing from you, and keep it up, and keep up that beautiful creative work. It inspires me to keep going. So thank you all so much for all of your support. Everybody stay safe, keep being creative, of course, and in the meantime, all of those good things that come to you in your day, make sure that you pay them forward. Until next time, it's Uru from me.